followers, or welcome if it's the first time that you are watching my YouTube channel, My Paranormal and Mystery TV. My name is Mugnai, but my artistic name is Rostumb. Today, I'm not going to talk you about the masterpiece movie by James Cameron, released in 1997, with protagonists Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. A masterpiece that won 11 Oscars, and when this masterpiece was released at the cinema, I was immediately in the first row, and then I bought the VHS. Now, I'm not talking about the movie. I'm going to briefly talk you about the real Titanic disaster, the controversies, and above all, in a few minutes, I'm going to make you watch the real, original photos and videos of the real Titanic, with the real people on board, and the moment of the catastrophe, the moment of the sinking, the infamous iceberg, and much more. These are all real, original photos and videos, and not fake videos, photos, photoshops, no fake photos, no photoshops, nothing. They are real. There are only a couple of photos that are in the center of a controversy, and there I warn you. You can ask me, how is it possible? Titanic sank in 1912. How is it possible that there are real photos and videos of that of more than a century ago? I immediately explain you this. You must know that maybe the main difference between the movie Titanic and the real catastrophe of Titanic was that, first of all, a mystery is that Titanic, 5 days before hitting the iceberg, had received messages, radio alerts that they were going into, because there were more than an iceberg. There were little icebergs, but there was this huge iceberg, absolutely dangerous. And the moment in which Titanic hit the iceberg wasn't a transatlantic alone in the middle of the ocean like in the film. But there were many ships, there were boats, and witnesses in all these other ships on a side behind Titanic, and rich people had incredibly rich video cameras and cameras. This is the reason why there are these extremely rare photos and videos. Moreover, not only there had been the founding of an incredible old camera about 2 years ago into the abyss that snapped some photos, but also some survivors at the Titanic tragedy took pictures. This is the reason why it's possible to have these shocking but unlosable photos and videos of the tragedy. Titanic was immediately called the unsinkable. Think about that it took 3 years to be built and 3 hours, almost 3 hours, to be broken into the Atlantic abyss. And on April the 10th, 1912, Titanic set sailed from Southampton, England, to New York, but had stopover in Cherbourg, France, and in Queenstown, Ireland, on April the 14th, 1912, Titanic hit that huge iceberg at about 11:44 p.m. and Titanic sank into the Atlantic abyss on April the 15th, 1912. And it also broke into parts. And this happened in almost 3 hours because Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m. The Titanic shipwreck became a huge human tragedy because 1,500 people died and only 705 people survived the tragedy. And it's still the most famous and mystery shipwreck of the history that keeps on living in people's minds and fascinating millions of people still nowadays. And now, are you ready to watch all these original, real, incredible photos, videos, and to know about the controversies? Let's watch immediately. Warning! Some images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers.
Of Titanic we have never seen until this morning.
For the past 111 years, historians have pored over every little detail from the Titanic tragedy. But even after these years of research, there are still a couple of details most people don't know about the Titanic and the disastrous event that made it a historical icon.
I start showing you the less disturbing photos of the Titanic. In this case, this photo is into the abyss, and other photos, meanwhile, the tragedy was happening. Later, I will show you more disturbing photos. The hidden truth kept for more than a century.
As the Titanic departed, many of the people aboard the ship were oblivious to the fact that trouble was brewing right in the coal bunkers. Fire in the hull. Did you know that the Titanic was on fire when it set sail for the first time? As unbelievable as it may seem, the ocean liner had been battling a blazing inferno that threatened to engulf the coal bunkers for 10 straight days prior to the ship's departure. For over 100 years, there has been an ongoing debate about the part played by the fire in the eventual fate of the Titanic. In this picture, you can clearly see the fire damage on the hull, so it's safe to say that the ocean liner was destined for disaster from the very start. According to reports released by the inquiry that was launched shortly after the event, the workers tasked with keeping the ship functioning properly battled a coal fire below deck for days on end, but they were never able to put it out. Now, while the main cause of the said fire remains elusive, there is no denying the devastating damage it did to the structural integrity of the ship. And while it has long been established that the fire was not directly responsible for the ship's sinking, the damage it caused played a significant role in how the tragedy played out.
Now are the real photos of the tragedy. Here you see the Titanic into the abyss of the Atlantic, where one of the cameras has been found. And this photo is real, original, and you can see the desperation of the people drowning into the Titanic. You see their efforts to try to survive the catastrophe. It took decades and decades to find the Titanic into the Atlantic Ocean. These are real photos. Titanic hit the iceberg and broke into parts. A deep sea mapping where the Titanic was. The first one was on September 1985. Thanks to robots from advanced technology, they could enter, and the scientists map the Titanic.
An iceberg and sinking.
For over a century, people have studied every little detail of the Titanic disaster. But despite all this research, there are still shocking facts and details that most of us don't know. What if we told you that a camera was found deep in the ocean, revealing haunting photos of the Titanic? Anticipation. The day finally arrived. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic stood poised at the docks of Southampton, England. Towering and gleaming in the morning light, the ship prepared to make her debut before a jaw-dropping crowd of over 100,000.
These are videos from
tourists,
Titanic
reporters.
movie.
It felt like the entire world had shown up
Instead,
just to
this
witness
is
history
true.
unfold. But here's what most don't know. The Titanic had already slipped into the sea before this grand event. On April 2nd, she quietly made her way from Belfast, where her story began, to Southampton. That trip, far less glamorous, was a technical test run. A final check before the show. Now,
And now the hidden truth for more than a century and controversies. Watch.
it gets even darker, and what you're about to hear next will shake you to your core. The iceberg warnings. The iceberg that sank the Titanic, perhaps another star of this century-old tale, would be the iceberg that sent the Titanic sinking fast into the cold waters of the Atlantic.
This was
On
an
April 14,
image from
1912,
Titanic
the
movie.
Titanic met its doom while cruising through the night, unaware that the area was filled with icebergs that could sink any ship, including the unsinkable Titanic. But where exactly did this iceberg come from, and what do we really know about its history? According to speculations, the iceberg that sank the Titanic may have originated from the Jakobshavn Glacier near Disco Bay on the west coast of Greenland. The glacier was said to have been formed in 1910 or 1911, and could have drifted north with the West Greenland current. As Captain Edward John Smith and his crew set sail for New York, they were fully aware that the drift ice field was larger in extent and more southerly than in the previous years. That's not all. The Titanic was also said to have received several radio reports from other ships that had traversed the waters, warning of the looming ice fields and icebergs. The first ship to alert the Titanic was La Touraine. The French ship sent the initial warning at around 5:46 p.m. on April 12th, informing the Titanic crew that they had spotted thick field ice in the same area where the Titanic eventually met its doom. On April 13th, Titanic also encountered the Fessy Y steamer Rappahannock, which was heading east. Whether the steamer informed the Titanic of the treacherous waters that lay ahead remains a subject of debate, but Rappahannock also suffered considerable damage from the ice fields, so there's a chance the crew might have shared that crucial piece of information with the Titanic. On the very day of the disaster, the Titanic received several reports of ice fields, and they ignored every single one of them. The first report came from the Coronia at about 12 minutes after 9 in the morning. The Coronia had radioed Titanic, reporting icebergs, growlers, and large fields of ice ahead. But Captain Smith was very confident in his ship, and only responded to the message with thanks. Then, at about 11:47, the Dutch ship Noordam also radioed the Titanic through the Coronia. The Noordam informed the Titanic of much ice, warning of the precarious journey that lay ahead. Once again, Captain Smith thanked the ship and shook the message off as if it were nothing. As the day went by, the Titanic received several other warnings and sightings of dangerous icebergs, but they all fell on deaf ears. Eventually, the Titanic crashed into an iceberg and sank, killing over 1,500 passengers and crew members. Now, scientists have discovered an old camera found in the deep ocean, which reveals horrifying Titanic photos. Seaman W. Wood, a keen photographer who was captain of the SS Estonian at the time. Just 2 days before the Titanic went down, the captain sighted this iceberg that was so massive He couldn't help but marvel at the sheer size. He took a picture of the iceberg and noted down the coordinates. Coincidentally, the coordinates matched the same place where the Titanic struck an iceberg.
But there were also witnesses of the tragedy, like this.
Telling eyewitness accounts comes from Dr. Washington Dodge, a first-class passenger whose written testimony has become one of the earliest and most vivid records of the disaster. Dr. Dodge, a prominent doctor, banker, and politician from San Francisco, had boarded the Titanic along with his wife, Ruth, and their young son, Washington Jr. Little did they know, their luxurious voyage would soon descend into a nightmare. The account, written after Dr. Dodge was rescued by the Carpathia, provides a chilling view into his state of mind. His hurried, almost illegible handwriting paints a picture of a man scrambling to make sense of an impossible situation.
Now I'm going to make you watch other disturbing, real, original photos, like this one. As you may see, the Titanic was sinking, and people were escaping everywhere. Other people tried to swim to survive. This is few minutes other photos, few minutes before the split and sinking.
Moments after the Titanic collided with the iceberg, it was already taking on massive amounts of water through the gaping hole in the hull. If you recall, this was the same part of the ship that had already been compromised by the smoldering fire in the coal bunker, a detail that played an undeniable role in the ship's eventual demise. By this point, the gravity of the situation was clear to most of the passengers. They knew the ship was sinking, but no one could have anticipated how rapidly it would go down. As water flooded the lower decks, the breach in the hull worsened, hastening the flow of seawater into the ship. The ship's compartments, once airtight, were now compromised, and the weight imbalance from the increasing volume of water put unbearable strain on the Titanic's structure.
And now I'm sure that you wonder, but how is it possible to find a camera still working after more than a century? The explanation.
Brown, a 31-year-old Irish Jesuit priest and amateur photographer, stepped aboard the world's largest and most luxurious ocean liner. His uncle, the Bishop of Cloyne, had gifted him a ticket for the first leg of this historic journey. At 883 feet long and weighing 46,328 tons, the Titanic was a marvel of engineering and opulence, marketed as unsinkable and representing the pinnacle of human achievement. From April 10th to 11th, Father Brown meticulously documented from the loading of trunks and mailbags at port to the bustling promenade deck as the ship passed the Portuguese RMSP Tagus. His lens captured memorable scenes of commerce, like a woman selling Irish lace aboard the vessel, and intimate moments of leisure, such as young Doug Spedden, a child survivor of Titanic, playing on deck. The photographs also documented the ship.
These are real videos made by Father Francis Brown.
The historical significance was his photograph of wireless operator Harold Bride at work in the Marconi room, one of the few images showing the ship's crucial communications center. Ticket to continue to New York. However, on April 11th, when he sought permission from his Jesuit superiors, he received a firm telegram ordering him to return to his duties in Dublin and disembark at Queenstown, Ireland. Following these orders, he left the Titanic at 1:30 p.m. on April 11th, as the ship anchored at Queenstown for its last port of call before embarking on its transatlantic crossing. This directive would unknowingly save not only his life, but also preserve his invaluable photographs, the only visual record that would survive the disaster, offering future generations their sole glimpse into life aboard the Titanic before tragedy struck. On April 14th, just 3 days after Father Brown's departure, the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic, claiming over 1,500 lives. His photographs, initially taken as simple travel memories, became the only surviving visual record of life aboard the doomed liner. 3 days after Father Brown's final photograph of Titanic's grandeur, a teenage girl would document what remained of that dream. The Unseen Lens, Bernice Palmer's Titanic journey. The Carpathia was a Cunard Line passenger steamship destined to become famous as Titanic's rescue vessel. Among its passengers stood a 17-year-old girl clutching her new Kodak Brownie box camera, a recent gift received for Christmas. Bernice "Bernie" Palmer, a young Canadian, would soon become an unlikely chronicler of maritime history's greatest tragedy. In April
Are there real videos and photos?
of mind, Bernie began documenting this historic rescue. Her photographs captured raw moments of survival that would become historic. In one striking image, Titanic survivors huddle on Carpathia's deck in mismatched borrowed clothing, their elegant first-class wardrobes lost to the Atlantic depths. Another frame freezes a powerful moment. Young honeymooners Mr. and Mrs. George, a harder of Brooklyn, their faces a complex mix of relief and haunted expressions. In that same photograph stands Mrs. Charles M. Hayes, her back turned to Bernie's camera, unaware she's being captured in a moment between salvation and grief. While she and her 2 daughters survived, her husband, the president of the Grand Trunk Railway, went down with the ship. Through a teenager's simple Brownie camera, these intimate moments of human survival and loss were preserved forever, while documenting.
And now I'm going to make you watch other real videos and photos. But as I told you at the beginning of this documentary, some photos underwent controversies. And above all, the photos of the real infamous iceberg. So I make you watch all these photos and videos, and then I can tell you for sure which the real infamous iceberg was. I go on.
Was Titanic's killer. The fatal ice, the hunt for Titanic's iceberg. Multiple ships crossing these waters claim to have photographed the very berg that sealed Titanic's fate, launching a century-long debate over which image truly captured history's most infamous piece of ice. Among these photographs, Bernice Palmer's images again proved historic. Taken at daybreak from Carpathia's deck, her photographs show a massive iceberg bearing what appeared to be a telling clue, a distinctive streak of red paint presumably scraped from Titanic's hull during the collision. Palmer sold the rights to these historic images to Underwood and Underwood, a New York photography agency, for a mere $10, with the contract specifically describing them as the iceberg and icefield run into by the Titanic. But Palmer's weren't the only photographs claiming to show the deadly berg. Captain W.F. Wood of the Etonian had photographed an imposing iceberg on April 12th, just 2 days before the disaster. His documented position placed this berg almost exactly where Titanic would meet her doom 40 hours later, a chilling coincidence that would later make his photographs some of the most scrutinized evidence in maritime history. The crew of SS Burma captured their own photographs, as did Captain de Carteret of the Minia, whose images also showed a suspicious red streak along the ice. Perhaps most intriguing is the photograph taken aboard the steamer Prince Adalbert on the morning of April 15th. The ship's steward, who captured the image, noted visible red paint on the berg's surface. This photograph would later hang for decades in the offices of the law firm representing the White Star Line, Titanic's owners, eventually selling at auction for thousands of pounds.
I can tell you for sure that this is the real infamous iceberg. It's Titanic. And then I will make you watch more knitted photos in which you will see also traces of blood. And think about that around. There were also other little icebergs if compared to this big one. But this is the real photo, original photo of the real iceberg who caused the sinking of Titanic. Other incredible original photos. This is the real iceberg that Titanic eat. These are other photos and videos of real Titanic into the abyss. And now watch this.
Hull section, a chance to let future generations touch a literal piece of Titanic's history.
It is the largest piece of the Titanic that will, in all likelihood, ever be recovered.
Their first attempt in 1996 became a dramatic spectacle as cruise ships gathered to watch the planned raising. The submersible Nautil attached flotation bags to the hull section, and for 2 hours, observers waited in anticipation. But fate had other plans. When the Canadian ship MV Jim Killebug proved unable to winch the massive piece aboard, and Hurricane Edward swept through, the hull section slipped back into the abyss. Undeterred, the team returned in 1998.
When released from its ballast, the lift bag floats back.
Then finally,
After 86 years in darkness, but raising the piece was just the beginning of its journey. In Boston, conservators faced a difficult decision, ultimately splitting it into 2 sections for practical transportation and exhibition. The main section underwent an intensive conservation process, desalination using sacrificial anodes, an 18-month sodium carbonate bath, and careful cleaning with high-pressure water jets. Remarkably, some of the hull's bronze fixtures remained functional, and traces of the original paint still clung to its surface. Today, this magnificent piece of maritime history rests in the Titanic, the artifact exhibition at Luxor, Las Vegas, where it has
A camera, 112 years old, was just recovered from the depths where the Titanic rests. Despite the rust, scientists were able to recover the film. What they discovered left them speechless.
after months and months
Of restoration, the few surviving pictures are almost ready to be seen. Experts are nervous. Some are terrified, because whatever this camera saw didn't want to be found. The silent,
more than a century later.
gentle light, the lead archivist traced the edges of the camera with her fingertips. It had no etching or distinguishing characteristics that would indicate its owner. Cameras like these were uncommon, costly, and unwieldy in 1912. Someone with a purpose, a writer maybe, or a rich traveler who was determined to record the journey, would have owned it. And unless the camera had passed from hand to hand until it reached modern times, this rich traveler's point of view would now be made public, more than a century later. The group discussed what to do next. While camera of a modern-day traveler who loved vintage devices, this camera had been on board the Titanic during its fateful journey, and somehow had endured a whole century of high pressure, salinity, and rust before it was finally found. Miraculously, the film had survived too. Not all of it, but enough. "This is no miracle," Dr. Voss whispered, shaking her head. Her hands showed the smallest trembling as she sealed the film in an archival sleeve. Notebook, salvaged in 1987 from a degraded leather bag located among the wreckage, included mundane observations about the voyage, the quality of the food, the temperament of his cabin mates, until the very final pages. The handwriting grew jagged, and the ink smeared as if penned quickly or under pressure. The final line, scrawled in the margin as if added at the last possible moment, read, "The ship has hit an iceberg. I must chronicle it. I am taking photos. God protect me." There is no more explanation. There is no trace of the chaos that transpired. Only those words, followed by emptiness. The journal's final pages were taken out. Forensic research found small indentations on the remaining paper, the ghostly pressure imprints of words scribbled with such power that they left impressions. Played shuffleboard on the deck. Their cheeks lit up with laughter in the middle of the game. A young girl's hair flowed sideways, caught in a breeze that no longer existed. Nearby, a woman held a basket of Irish lace, her body bending slightly as the deck began its first invisible tilt. The lace flew over the basket's edge, making an ordinary moment spectacular, because both the woman and the lace would vanish beneath the Atlantic in minutes. Then came the clock. A close-up of the ship's beautiful clock, landing, with water already lapping at the lowest stairs. The reflection in the glossy mahogany paneling revealed humans clinging to the railing above, their forms warped by the rising flood, something the camera had not recorded directly. The sight of lifeboats was particularly frightening. Boat number 14 swung at a drunken angle, its ropes partially cut. Faces peered skyward, not in terror, but in something worse. Dawning realization. One woman's lips formed a beautiful O, with her gloved fingers pressed on her cheeks. A crewman's arm stretched toward the camera, whether in warning or supplication. Life belt from a locked cabinet. Two mothers straining to keep children above the rising tide. The camera swung to face the water with startling speed. A dark wall of water rushed across the deck, devouring everything in its path. Before the lens impacted the water, a hand stretched down. Whether to aid or to imitate help, no one knew. Next came bubbles and darkness. Then, unbelievably, one more image. The Titanic's surface as viewed from below, where the mast should have been. Only the empty ocean looked back. The press.
These real photos are really disturbing and make me cry, because this is not a movie. These were real human beings fighting for their lives. Look, it's really something really terrific. And here, other people. This is an extremely rare, real, original photo of Titanic. Meanwhile, it's sinking. This photo was snapped by a person who was around in one of those boats, ships I told you before, or from the life ships. This is authentic. Titanic is really sinking. This is another photo snapped from one of these ships, boats around Titanic, because as I told you before, Titanic wasn't alone in the middle of the ocean like in the movie by James Cameron. And one of people were rich could snap this incredible photo of Titanic sinking into the ocean. Are the real original photos, people in the lifeboats who survived the tragedy. Are there really disturbing photos taken by Bernice? I warn you, they are real and strong.
Valuable stories when he met Bernice Palmer aboard the Carpathia. She had not only taken pictures of the Titanic survivors on the ship's deck, but she had also captured photos of the iceberg that sank the Titanic. The reporter offered to develop, print photos to Bernie, along with $10. Not fully realizing how valuable her pictures were, Bernie happily agreed, and Underwood ended up with priceless images of the Titanic wreck for almost nothing. This is the contract between Bernie and the reporter that transferred the rights to the photos. In 1986, Bernie donated her camera, Titanic photos, and related materials to the Smithsonian. Bernie Palmer's photos provide a rare personal view of the Titanic story and love that comes with starting a new chapter in life. It's hard to imagine the pain they would face later, but this picture captures a moment of pure joy, untainted by the tragedy that would follow. Another powerful image Bernie captured shows the Carpathia arriving at the Titanic disaster site. Under the pale moonlight, rescuers saw bits of wreckage.
Watch.
Brings you into that still, heartbreaking moment. One of the most haunting images she captured is of the infamous iceberg. Looking at it through her camera lens feels almost unreal. This massive, ordinary chunk of ice was the cause of the downfall of such a grand ship and the lives aboard it.
And this photo was snapped by Bernie, so this was the real iceberg. Here's another photo. The real iceberg. This is another tragic, really tragic real photo of the disaster of Titanic. Watch these people. They were into Titanic, embarking water. Many people drowned in this horrific tragedy. And now I go on. These are really strong images.
Disasters.
Really. Other photos. It wasn't unsinkable. The Titanic. This is another shocking photo. Titanic was in flames and it was sinking. Look.
Red paint stain, perhaps from the Titanic's hull. This terrifying picture came to represent the ruthless force of nature. According to survivors, the iceberg was tall and angular, and portions of it were lit by the ship's lights just before the impact.
And now, do you remember this lovely old woman who died in 2009? She was the youngest passenger, became famous. Watch.
Famous. Melvina, whose real name was Elizabeth Gladys Melvina Dean, became a memorable figure in Titanic history. She was the most minor passenger on the doomed ship at 9 weeks old. Her family had intended to establish a new life in America while traveling in third class. Following the crash, Melvina's father, Bertram Frank Dean, stayed on the Titanic and died, while his mother, brother, and Melvina were put aboard Lifeboat 10. After the catastrophe, Melvina's family moved back to England, where she was up hearing tales of the Titanic. As she grew older, Melvina attended events and shared her family's stories, becoming an active voice in preserving the ship's memory. As one of the last surviving Titanic survivors, she gained notoriety in the latter half of the 20th century. A living example of perseverance, Melvina was adored until she died in 2009 at 97. There are no survivors advantage. Access to lifeboats on the Titanic was not equal. While many third-class passengers were stranded below deck because of barred gates and unclear passages, first-class passengers had better access to deck exits. According to later testimony from a few third-class survivors, they had to dismantle obstacles to get to lifeboats. While third-class passengers had to fend for themselves, first-class passengers also enjoyed preferential treatment from crew members, directing many straight to lifeboats. Despite having a 75-person capacity, several lifeboats shockingly departed with as few as 12.
And now, do you want to watch how Titanic is now into the abyss of the Atlantic and also into the transatlantic? I guess yes. So there had been several expeditions and many sub took these videos and photos. I go on. This is the Titanic now. As every year passes by, the Titanic is getting rustier and older, but even in 2026, nobody has been able to take the rests of Titanic on the water surface. You can see these sub have particular cameras, underwater cameras. As you may see, the passing of time, because Titanic is into the Atlantic abysses from 1912, and it's incredible to have been able to recover so many things. Years after years, still what remained into the Titanic. These shootings are amazing. Look at the video, it's incredible. What was the whole of the rich Titanic in the movie before the tragedy, of course. Think about that. 1 century and 14 years have passed. It's incredible how the chandelier is still there. It's it's really, really incredible. Entering the Titanic, there are still incredible, almost intact objects you are going to watch right now. Look and think about. Look, it's amazing. Really? Titanic sank in 1912. It's really incredible. Amazing. Look. I'm really, really close to cry because this is the real Titanic where so many people lost their lives. Watch the fishes. And this was a fireplace into the Titanic. And it's almost still intact. This was the magnificent door you watched also in the Masterpiece movie. Look how it is now. It's pretty visible that it's still enchanting. The door. Look, this was the door, of course, originally, before the tragedy. It's really incredible. You see fishes. Incredible. Incredible. And now, in these last months, many people got to know that Leonardo DiCaprio, the mythical actor who played Jack in the Titanic in a more than perfect way, Leonardo stated that he regretted to have played in Titanic. This revelation shocked almost all the world, but there is an explanation. This is Leonardo DiCaprio, and the reason why by now he regrets to have played in the Titanic.
Into the introspective artist behind films like The Revenant, The Aviator, and The Wolf of Wall Street. Throughout his career, he's earned a reputation for being intensely private, choosing to let his performances speak rather than his personal reflections. But in a rare and revealing interview, the Oscar-winning actor opened up about what it truly feels like to reach 50, how he views his life and work today, and the one decision that still haunts him.
So, listen what Leonardo DiCaprio says in this interview.
Where did all this come from? I grew up in a kind of an artistic household. I was always kind of imitating my dad's friends, and I would imitate everyone around us in the neighborhood. I'd do that, carry that over in school, and get into a lot of trouble constantly. Once I found out that people actually got paid for this, I was like, all right.
When Leonardo
his biggest regret is not doing the 1997 film Boogie Nights, telling the magazine, I can't imagine anyone but Mark Wahlberg in it. When I finally got to see that movie, I just thought it was a masterpiece.
As the conversation turned towards reflection, Paul Thomas Anderson posed a question about professional regrets, and DiCaprio didn't hesitate. I'll say it even though you're here, he began. My biggest regret is not doing Boogie Nights. The 1997 film, which became one of Anderson's breakout masterpieces, went on to define a generation of cinema. an exploration of ambition, identity, and excess in the adult film industry of the 70s. DiCaprio was originally considered for the lead role of Eddie Adams, the naive young dreamer who becomes a porn star named Dirk Diggler. At the time, DiCaprio was coming off the global success of Titanic, a film that made him a household name and one of the most in-demand actors in the world. Choosing between projects was a constant balancing act, and in this case, he opted for James Cameron's epic rather than Anderson's smaller but daring project. Looking back now, he sees it as a turning point. "It was a profound movie of my generation," he said. "I can't imagine anyone but Mark Wahlberg in it. When I finally got to see that movie, I just thought it was a masterpiece." Boogie Nights went on to catapult Wahlberg's career and cement Anderson's reputation as one of America's boldest filmmakers. For DiCaprio, the regret wasn't about missing out on fame, he had that in spades, but on the creative depth and cultural impact the film carried. The irony wasn't lost on either man during the interview. The very person he had turned down decades ago was now sitting across from him, asking about regrets. Still, it's worth noting that DiCaprio's choice to make Titanic wasn't exactly a misstep. That film became the defining work of the 1990s and launched him to superstardom.
I can tell you, here you see a very young Leonardo DiCaprio that no regrets, Leonardo. I think that I watched Boogie Nights, but I definitely prefer Titanic. So I think that Leonardo shouldn't have regrets for Boogie Nights, because according to me, he was perfect in Titanic. So, thanks for watching. See you soon at the next mystery. Stay tuned.